um, co-president of the European Greens in the European Parliament and candidate in the Green primary. I'm really pleased that you can join us here today for a short interview where he wants to ask you a couple of questions in relation to the primary. And I noticed I'm mainly taking the questions from what you set out in your programme, why you're standing and what you want to do as part of the campaign and in the new Parliament. I suppose first and foremost, I very much noticed at the front of your kind of programme you're saying we need better democratic control of the European institutions. We need a stronger Parliament. How do you think that might work?
I think this matters right now and for the coming years, mainly for all the regulation we did to fight the financial and economic crisis in Europe, but because of certain circumstances, also sometimes the role of UK, we decided too many measures based on intergovernmental treaties, and this leads us into a situation where the main measures coming from Europe for the countries, so-called countries in crisis, are without real participation and without control of the European Parliament. And this cannot continue. The Troika and the role of the Troika, that people in the south of Europe, for example, make the Troika similar with the European institutions, shows the whole problem. The Troika is out of control, and this must change.
Can I ask maybe just more specifically on that, because we in Ireland were very much at the centre and suffered a lot through the economic crisis. Are there any other lessons, maybe economic lessons to learn in terms of the approach that was taken by both national governments or by the European institutions? What specifically do you think are the lessons we should learn?
So first of all, I think it's completely wrong that meanwhile the focus is mainly on the budgetary reforms of the member states in problems and all others, because in the very beginning we had not the problem with the public budget of those states. We had the problem that the financial market, banks and other companies had accumulated too many risks, had not had a sustainable strategy for their enterprises. And I think it's completely wrong that meanwhile, instead of working on a robust regulation for the financial markets, for example with the banking union, we are still mainly focused on the reform or the cuts in the budget, in the public budgets. I think the main lesson, for example, learned from Greece is if you go only for austerity measures in such a country and forget about the necessity of economic development, then these reforms will end in a huge mess, and Greece politically and economically shows this.
Can I go into four, if I can, briefly, policy areas? Again, ones that I know you've worked in and you've mentioned specifically your programme. The first one in relation to data protection, and obviously you've all been shocked by the revelations of the level of data surveillance of European citizens. What do you think specifically can be done or should be done by the Union to rectify that?
I did not get the beginning of your question. You are asking the consequences of this debate on NSA and all the problems known since Snowden decided to blow the whistle?
I suppose, because that would take an hour. But just specifically in terms, is there a specific measure you think Europe should be presenting next to the American government, or indeed the UK government, I suppose you could argue as well, in terms of how we stop the levels of surveillance? Is there a political measure that the Union can run from the centre?
Yes.
You think that have?
So we worked already in the Parliament, also very much driven by our colleague Jan Philipp Albrecht. We worked on data protection regulation. We made in the Parliament big progress for something which really fits to the problems we have data protection regulation, which is a pity because so we have no progress so far achieved in between the United States and Europe. The idea of no spy agreement completely failed. For Germany, for example, the only outcome so far was that the United States promised not to listen any longer to the phones of our chancellor. So we need this regulation on the European level to protect privacy.
Probably need some more Greens in the next European Parliament as well to push it
Would
through.
be nice to see here.
Of course of that. Second issue, I know you've worked a lot on it with good understanding, and I can't simplify a huge issue down to kind of a particular measure, but if there was one change you were looking for in the European agricultural policy area, as an area of particular interest to Ireland, what would that be? What's the obvious thing you think that change that we need to make that isn't being done?
I think the patterns of the subsidies, yeah, and this is one of the main instruments we have in the common agricultural policy. The patterns of the subsidies are also after the reform are completely wrong. In general, you can say that 80% of the direct payments from Brussels go to 20% of the farmers or enterprises in the agribusiness and around. And if we do not change this, and we failed during the reforms, but if we do not change this, then the money from Brussels and our cap will always fuel the growth of industrialized agriculture. The second problem is the ecological idea in this what we called the greening of the cap. The ecological idea was very much focused on connecting the direct payments in some parts to ecological measures, mainly to crop rotation. And this was very important as an idea. We also failed with this, but I think for Europe it's always true. You fail in a reform, you make only small steps forward, but after the reform is before the next reform. So we are already preparing with our allies in Brussels the better reform of the cap, and so during the next legislation we will continue to fight this battle.
Okay, we're summarising big issues down to tight questions, but I suppose it's very useful for us to hear a summary of what the key approaches you think we should take. Another issue obviously of interest in Ireland, and Ireland has been controversially in the mix of the debate, is the whole issue of tax harmonisation. Is there a simple summary you think of what we should be doing, or where Europe should go in the approach towards harmonisation of tax systems, particularly around corporation tax?
Yes, I think we should so at least achieve a new base for the corporate taxes. So there must be an approach to close the huge gaps, the differences in between the taxations for companies in the different member states. I know this is a very challenging idea. I know it will be difficult. I know also that Ireland has been blamed too much for having too low taxes because other countries offer other possibilities to their big players to avoid taxes. So I think we need to close this gap. And in addition, the idea that companies who make profits, international players who make profits in one country, they have to pay the taxes in those countries where they make the profits.
One fourth area, specific policy area, and I was not sure because it's very current, but also because I recall you've had a keen involvement in Ukraine. How did you start that work, and what's your latest connection, or what's your sense of what
times Ukraine. I spent the New Year's Eve on Maidan, uh, joined the concert on stage with Ruslana, delivered together with her a short speech, and so right now I'm suffering from not being able to help effectively against the violence. And to make this clear, the escalation, this strategy of escalation and violence, this was initiated and wanted by President Yanukovych and his government, and I hope very much that we can, if we continue to pay attention, that we can stop it.
Last question, and I suppose on maybe a more brighter note, you've come over to Ireland several times in recent years to help with some of the work we've been doing around climate change issues and so on, and that was really appreciated. Was there any impression you had of the country from those visits that you'd like to share? What struck you when you were here?
So I will ever remember the wonderful, nice landscape. I loved especially the short trip we had to this very nice lighthouse. But beyond the landscape, I could see that there are wonderful gardens in Ireland, and as a gardener by profession, I would really appreciate to come back once for only looking or having a closer look to those wonderful gardens of Ireland.
Rebecca, next time you come back, I'm going to give you a spade and you're going to go into my back garden and get some work done.
I can give you a little help.
You sure can. I really appreciate you giving the time today. I wish you best of luck and the three other candidates in the election, and I look forward to seeing you back hopefully in the European Parliament, and hopefully some Irish Green MEPs join you again.